Hi everybody, it's Miss Amy and I'm here to read Chapter 7 of Lynn Reed Banks, The Return of the Indian. So when we left last week, Omri, by the way, Miss Amy does not own the rights to this book. She just owns the book and she's glad she gets to share it with you. Last time we read this in Chapter 6, Omri he kind of rushed to Patrick's house to see if he could help him and got Patrick on board, and now Omri and Patrick's little sister kind of got in it's not called a row, it's called a row. I found that out the other day when I was watching something on the British channel or something that was British. It's called a row. They got into a bit of a row over a box of small figures that had a surgeon and a doctor. These were modern day figures. I'm not positive. I wasn't positive when we finished if he actually got that out the door or not. So let's go ahead and read Chapter 7. It's called Matron. Under the first street lamp, Omri pulled up. His heartbeat was hammering. Well, asked Patrick eagerly, did you get it? Let's look. And come to talk about hammering, you might hear some sounds in the background. Mr. Matt is out there working in the yard and he's using a drill and different things. So you'll probably hear it, just so you know. Just ignore him. Okay. Omri had something in his hand, but he knew it wasn't the one he'd wanted. It wasn't the surgeon. He would have been able to feel the square shape of the operating table. It was a single figure. He held his hand closed around it, afraid to look. What if it was only a lawyer or the idiotic, bowler-hatted businessman? Those aren't nice words, are they? Slowly, in agony of suspense, Omri uncurled his fingers. Both boys slumped with despair. Omri gave a deep groan. Then Patrick railed. It could be worse. Nurses have to know something. They can operate. They're not trained. It's better than nothing. They walked on. Omri sunk in gloom. Patrick kept trying to cheer him up. Well, if anything, that's good. Listen, if he can hang on till tomorrow, we can go out and buy anything we like at the model shop. They'll have the same set. Meanwhile, at least the nurse will be able to tell us how bad he is. So at least they got a nurse, maybe back when this was written or in the time where they're trying to portray it. Nurses maybe didn't seem like a great big deal, but I know nurses these days are a great big deal. And they do know a lot of stuff. If she doesn't drop dead when we bring her out of the cupboard, said Omri. He was cursing himself for not managing to grab the surgeon. He would also incidentally have liked to jump up and down on Tamsin's stomach until she burst like a balloon. He was bruised all over. Well, let's just think about this, ladies and gentlemen. He did start the fight. Patrick, of course, had never seen the district where Omri had now lived. As they came out of the station, he paused, glanced down Hobble Road, and said, "Blimey, this is a bit rough." Omri said nothing. They began to hurry towards his house. "What are the kids like around here?" "Well, you have to stand up for yourself." They were passing the amusement arcade on the other side of the street, of course. It was just closing. The proprietor, a surly-looking Sikh, S-I-K-H, Sheik, was urging everyone out. There was a good deal of swearing, jeering, and shoving. A scuffle started. A rather small skinhead jostled an older boy, who reacted by hurling him unceremoniously into the road, where he was narrowly missed by a passing car. "Crumbs!" exclaimed Patrick. "Did you see that?" "Yes, and it'll be us next if they spot us, said Omri. Come on. Omri's mother opened the door to his knock. She was furious. Where on earth have you been? Don't you ever go out again at night without telling me. I've been frantic. Oh, hello, Patrick. Fancy seeing you. Are you planning to spend the night? Patrick looked daunted, but Omri had no time to pacify his mother after a brief, sorry, Mom. He dragged Patrick after him up the stairs, deaf to her inquiries about where he'd been and where Patrick would sleep. As soon as they had the door of the bedroom shut behind them, Omri switched on the main light. He'd left the bedside lamp on so bright stars wouldn't be in the dark. Patrick cautiously approached the chest, his eyes wide, as if his unbelief had come back to him, and the sight of the living miniature people struck him afresh as incredible. Bright Stars had jumped to her feet as they came in. She recognized Patrick at once and raised her hand to greet him. Hello. Halo. Hello. Hallo. I know they're saying hello, but it's just how they're writing it. I'm trying to figure out how to say it. Hello. I don't know. Hello, Bright Stars, he said loftily. How's Little Bear? She stepped aside and pointed. Little Bear's eyes were open. Yay! They were big with pain. He fastened them on Patrick and then saw Omri. He didn't speak, but a look of joy came over his face. He closed his eyes. Omri, help now. Or, excuse me, let me rephrase that because it is a question. Omri, help now? Asked Bright Stars beseechingly. We're going to try. He wanted to tell her not to be too hopeful, but he couldn't. He brought the figure of the nurse out of his pocket. He and Patrick examined it again. She's wearing one of those weird high hats, said Patrick. When I was in the hospital having my tonsils out, nurses with those sort of hats were important. All the others scurried about when they came into the ward. Maybe she's a matron, said Omri, who, though he hadn't ever been in a hospital, did not watch TV for nothing. Yeah, something like that. Come on, let's do it. No matter what the circumstances, this was always a thrilling moment. Into the cupboard went the little female figure in its blue uniform dress and white apron and elaborate cap. Would she be old or young? Awful or nice? Above all, how would she react when she saw them? Sammy's getting a little tongue-tied. I've been doing homework all afternoon, trying to buckle down so I don't have to do any tomorrow. And now I'm rushing because I don't want to make this too long. In the past, the little people they had brought to life had been superstitious enough, or drunk enough, to accept the fantastic situation. Even Tommy had been easy to convince that he was dreaming. But a modern person might have much more trouble accepting his facts. A quick turn back and forth of the key, and instantly a severe voice could be heard calling from inside the cupboard. Nurse! Nurse! Phone through immediately and tell maintenance there's been a power cut in Ward 12. No need for alarm, ladies. Just a little electrical failure. We'll have the emergency generator working in no time. Omri opened the cupboard door. Ah! Cried the voice. That's more like it. Now what was I thinking before he opened the cupboard, since she thought that it was just a power outage? That maybe, just maybe, Omri should have explained the situation. Don't you think, boys and girls? Anyways, moving on. And it stopped. Omri swung the door right back. The matron stood there on a shelf where they had put her, her hands coming slowly away from her hips. She looked at the two enormous faces for a few seconds. Then she covered her eyes, rubbed them, shook her head briskly, and looked again. Then she said, "What's this, then, boys? Some kind of trick? But the mirrors, put the mirrors away and get back to your beds." Then, when nothing happened, her face suddenly went as white as her cap. She did kind of a spin on one heel and fell straight backward off the shelf. Omri just managed to catch her. He'd been half expecting something of the sort. She lay in the palm of his hands in a dead faint. Omri marveled at the feeling of her tiny, warm, limp body in its crisp, starched clothes alive. He transported her gently to the chest and showed her to Bright Stars. "White woman dead?" she asked, aghast. "No, no, she just had a fright. Make her sit up and put her head between her knees." He showed her how. Bright Stars wasted no time. After a minute or two, the matron showed signs of reviving. The first thing she did was reach up to check that her cap, which was likely a white organdy castle with flying buttresses and banners, was still in place. Miraculously, it was. She scrambled to her feet and stared around her. She was middle-aged. She was my age. Omri guessed from her face and voice she wore glasses and no makeup and looked formidable. I do have makeup on. I don't know if you can see it. He was glad he was not a patient in her charge. At the same time, she did look as if she knew her job. If only she was not too terrified to do it. He cleared his throat. "I know it's hard to believe," he began, "but you've come through a magic cupboard which has made you very small. Please don't be frightened. You can think it's a dream if you like, or some kind of trick, but there's nothing to be afraid of. After you've helped us, you can go back to your normal life. Would you mind telling us your name?" The woman opened and shut her mouth several times like a goldfish. Then she managed to say very faintly, "You may call me Matron." Then she swayed and put her hand to her forehead. "I must be going mad," she muttered, and she looked as if she might fall again. "Please, you're not mad. Don't faint." Matron stiffened at once and lifted her chin. She must have a double chin like Miss Amy. "Faint? Me? Don't be absurd. I've never fainted in my entire life." She straightened her splendid cap and stared at them haughtily. "Matrons don't faint. The very idea." Patrick opened his mouth, but Omri nudged him into silence. "I beg your pardon," he said. "Not that I wouldn't be grateful for a strong cup of tea," she remarked severely, "especially if there's any work to be done." "There is," Omri exclaimed eagerly. "I'll get you some tea later, but could you please look at the patient for us?" Bright Stars was already almost pulling Matron over to where Little Bear was lying on the ground. "Dear me," murmured the matron. She adjusted her cap and her glasses and knelt down beside Little Bear's prone form. After a brief but efficient examination, she rose, looked over her glasses at Bright Stars, evidently decided she was innocent of any crime, and turned accusing gaze on the boys. "This man," she announced, "has been shot in the back." "Yes, we know," said Omri. "He needs immediate operation to remove the bullets." "We know," said Omri, "only they're no bullets. They're musket balls, you see. He must be taken at once to the nearest hospital. I recommend my own, St. Thomas's." "Matron," said Patrick. "Yes, young man, we can't. You see, St. Thomas's is our size, and he is your size. They wouldn't be able to help him. Everything would be too big for him. Don't you see?" Matron closed her eyes for a moment, swayed visibly. Omri stretched out a hand to catch her, and then righted herself with an effort. "This is exceedingly peculiar," she said, "to say the very least. I don't profess to understand what has happened to me, but still press on. What do you suggest? Could he hold on until tomorrow?" She pursed her lips and shook her head. Most unwise. Omri's heart sank. Couldn't you do it?" The matron started violently. I perform the task of a surgeon? Such a thing would be unthinkable. The etiquette of the medical profession absolutely forbids it. But if it didn't? What do you mean? I mean, could you do it if you were allowed to? Allowed to? It's not a matter of permission. Well then, you see, Omri said, and now the same imploring note crept into his voice as had been in Bright Star's eyes. "There's no one else." Matron turned and stared down at Little Bear for a long moment. "But I have no equipment," she said at last. Patrick threw back his head with a groan. "Ugh! That's true. Of course. No one can operate without instruments. Why didn't we think of that?" "I didn't think of it," said Omri. "We've got instruments. Sort of." Patrick turned to gape at him. "Where?" For answer, Omri reached again for the plastic figure which had once been Tommy. Silently, he put him back into the cupboard and turned the key. When he opened the door, there once again was a neat pile of clothes, the boots, and the bag with the red cross on it. Boys and girls, that ends chapter 7. I wish it didn't, but we're already into over 18 minutes, and I don't want to bore you or anyone else to death. But I do want to leave you with this one question. What do you think will happen next? Do you think the matron is going to be able to help? Do you think the tools that they're going to use from Tommy's bag that he's left after he's passed away are going to be sufficient? What do you infer? What is your prediction? What is your hypothesis? I will make my own tonight as I rest, and we will all have to find out what happens in the next chapter when we meet again. If you're watching this before bedtime, boys and girls, sleep tight, or excuse me, good night, and sleep tight.